Welcome to Fringe Paranormal. I'm your host, Crystal Diff, and today we're going to talk about a contest involving ghosts counting oranges. And yes, we have ties right here in Charlotte County to one of these contests. It involved the practice of spiritualism, or a belief that the spirits of the dead exist among us and can communicate with the living in various ways, usually using mediums or a practitioner who can channel and communicate with spirits and relay those messages to us. Mediums often encounter automatic writing, where they just start writing, or writing happens on its own through spirits. There's also spirit photography, where you're either catching a spirit on film or catching the ectoplasm, or the external spiritual energy oozing and floating around the orifices of these mediums. There's also automatic painting and drawing, and of course knocking sounds, where you have a medium ask for somebody to knock a certain amount of times in order to answer the questions that the people are asking these spirits. Now, spiritualism really grew in popularity from about the 1840s to the 1920s, so the height of the Victorian era. Amongst other memento mori and tons of mourning rituals that were happening during this time where there was a high mortality rate. Queen Victoria even pursued spiritualism herself. Unfortunately, fraud was very rampant amongst mediums during this time, where they were claiming to connect you with your deceased loved ones for a price. There were even fraudulent investigators reporting on fraudulent mediums. Everyone wanted in on this hot new trend. I am not saying that all mediums are frauds by any means, but there were people who sought to extort these grieving people for easy money at the height of spiritualism's popularity. They would create elaborate schemes and mechanisms to move tables. They would use accomplices to gather information from their guests or perform tricks. They would levitate objects with wires that were hidden. They would have somebody knock on a wall behind the other room. They would use magnets to create automatic writing. They would read through sealed envelopes with alcohol. They would create spirit touches and much more. These spiritualism parties or seances became very, very popular. People were having them at dinner parties. It was a regular happening during the Victorian era. Coincidentally, this is also when the term parlor trick starts being used around the 1850s. Even Harry Houdini, the famous magician, became part of the seances at first to contact his beloved mother, and then using his knowledge of illusion and sleight of hand on a personal crusade to expose the fraudulent mediums. With all the fraud surrounding spiritualism, tests were created to try to prove your validity as a medium or a psychic. Prizes were announced from various agencies to provide proof of the afterlife. One such offer in November 1908 from the Metropolitan Psychical Society of New York would provide a $5,000 prize for any medium that could pass their test, created by Society President James Kellogg and Secretary W.S. Davis. Now that's about $140,000 in 2020. The test consisted of noiselessly spilling oranges behind the medium in question, and those present conducting the test would shield their eyes to avoid knowing the answer to how many oranges that there were, in order to rule out telepathy. If the spirit guide and the medium could produce correct answers to render coincidence improbable, the medium would be presented with the prize money. This test was publicized all over the United States and Europe, and the office was flooded with thousands of letters, photographs, and mediums coming out in person within just a few days of the prize offering, with those hoping to claim this extraordinary prize. It states that only in one instance, with one person, was it correctly guessed, but not sufficiently enough to rule out random coincidence. So they did not get the prize. From an article produced in the Evening World on November 28, 1908, it states, "Our society does not deny the existence of spirits," Mr. Davis concluded. "Our minds are open on the subject. Let anybody in the world produce a medium that can meet our simple orange test, and we will concede their existence and pay $5,000 for the privilege." A month later, an article was published by the Tampa Tribune on December 20th, 1908, involving some of Charlotte County's finest citizens. The headline read, "Spook Contest Spirits Tricky. Punta Gorda Judge Writes Experience to New York Psychical Society," and describes the test as sifting the wheat from the chaff among spirits, to which the test changed from just counting oranges to correctly guessing items placed on a tray. Judge Francis Kemper Adams personally wrote to Kellogg to describe two women of interest from Punta Gorda of whom he was acquainted. In the article, the judge went on to report that when his deputy sheriff John Bowman was shot in the night, the two women declared who the killer was. The man was tried and convicted. They have also correctly reported an attempted murder and foretold natural deaths and unforeseen events, and I quote, "which none who knew ever supposed would occur." There were actually 3 men who were tried of Marshall Bowman's assassination in 1903: George Battersby, Richard Dick Wyndham, and Isaiah Cooper. Cooper was ultimately found guilty and was supposed to hang for the crime, but the evidence was felt by some to be very inconclusive, and they thought that he was possibly a scapegoat for the crime. His sentence was commuted to life by Governor Albert Gilchrist, and then he escaped from a turpentine camp about 10 years later, never to be seen again. The attempted murder was against Captain Albert F. Dewey. Luckily, the assailant's bullet ricocheted into Dewey's leg, ultimately saving his life. The judge was instructed to do at-home experiments suggested by Kellogg and his colleagues at the Metropolitan Psychical Society, to which there was no official reply back to the organization on how well the women fared. Some have speculated that one of the women was Mrs. Marion MacAdal, wife of Perry MacAdal, a wealthy power couple in early Punta Gorda who were known spiritualists. Her hobbies included planting tropical plants, including the famed banyan tree that is still at Gilchrist Park to this day. It's also where their home once stood. Painting and spirit photography. It is said that they made a pact that whoever passed away first would come back in spirit form and tilt a painting that Marion made of the first home in Punta Gorda before their grand home took its place along Charlotte Harbor. After Perry's death, she waited for the signal for years, but never reported seeing the painting tilt. There's currently a historical marker near that banyan tree in Gilchrist Park detailing the history of the first home site, so you can see where Marion MacAdal once lived. In 1909, the Metropolitan Psychical Society withdrew their offer after poor results. Many critiqued the test as unscientific, poorly designed, and a publicity stunt on the behalf of the organization. For example, if you guessed the correct amount of oranges, you'd move on to another test requiring the spirit to have X-ray vision or to read in English. Some argued that if a medium's spirit guide was an American Indian or an enslaved person who could not read or write English, then that would lead to a negative result, regardless of whether there was actual paranormal activity. But don't fret, even though the Metropolitan Psychical Society did cancel their quest and close the contest, there are still more current prizes available for evidence of the paranormal. I'd love to be able to interview one of the Fringe Paranormal crew on their success with this contest, so be sure to contact me if you do win. For more information and for the articles that I used as source material for this program, visit our discussion board, padlet.com/history services/Fringe Paranormal. I hope you enjoyed this little snippet of paranormal history in Charlotte County, and I'll be back to see you next month with a new topic.